Welcome to Dice and Mind, a podcast hosted by Browne and Jason Kaufman to explore the intersection of life, games, science, music, philosophy, and creativity through interviews with leading creatives. All are welcome in this space.
It would not be the end of the year where you have a number of holidays without us talking about and reminding everyone that this could be a tough time of year for folks.
That's right.
It's a year where, you might have parties, seeing family, celebrating whatever you might celebrate. There's a couple that are bigger on the calendar, but there's also smaller festivals and things that go on. But I think, Jason, you've alluded to it in the past, and you'll allude to it in the future. For us in the Northern Hemisphere, we are coming up on the shortest days of the year. As little light as we're going to get, and the further north you go, the less and less you get.
Yep.
So it can be tough on folks. And I think when we first started talking about and doing our first couple episodes on this last year, right?
Yep, last winter this time.
The idea was, well, how can games help during these times when people might be struggling even more now than they might be at other times during the year? We've heard, how many times have we heard on the news about, and I can never get this right, it's, what is it, seasonal
affective disorder.
Thank you. You have people who have symptoms of that, people that are just struggling in general, and the holidays remind them of it,
right?
Whatever the case is. Now, I have personal perspectives and maybe some professional. Jason, you have probably some of both, plus you have the added benefit of having clinical background and research background on some of this, like we had talked about last year. What was the article that I sent? I thought I sent us an article in text. I'll come back to it in a bit, but I think there's this idea that how can we find things? What can we find, passions or otherwise, that can help lift our spirits? I think there's one thing we're going to talk about next week with our guest.
Yep, that's perfect.
That I think is going to be really beneficial. But independent of that, what can we do to help us have better mental health, especially this time of year?
Yeah, I mean, let's kind of taking our own motto, our own raison d'etre for the podcast. What can we do maybe through tabletop role-playing games as a start? And I think the answers to that really echo the broader answers of how can we take care of ourselves. How can we help ourselves, especially for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, during these environmentally darker times, emotionally darker times, for many, not all, but for many. Well, let's look at an RPG. Let's look at the tabletop. What do we see there? We see a game. We see an endeavor, a process intended to simply be enjoyed. Not to be judged, not to be berated, but to be enjoyed. Of course, we're assuming a good group, we're assuming an accepting, supportive GM, but come on, the tabletop role-playing games are and should be fun. And so instantly, it's an invitation to enjoy ourselves, to leave reality behind for 1 to 12 hours, depending on how your group plays, but to leave reality behind in just the healthiest, most beautiful of ways. We see a system, role-playing games, which in this day and age, the end of 2023, are almost to each one wonderfully accepting, where the games the narrative backstories, the mechanics, they welcome a player no matter where they're from, how they speak, whom they love, or how they look. You can
the,
simply be at the table.
the article, I found it. U.S. suicides reached a record high last year.
Oh, yeah, you sent me that.
Yeah,
Right.
and older men are the highest risk.
Define older.
Uh, it was older. It was older than 45, if I remember correctly. Although I'm
Yeah, so
having
like
trouble
our
accessing the article.
age and then way up.
Higher. Yeah.
Yeah, this is an issue. And these are, primarily the people we're speaking to,
Yep.
right? I mean, not hopefully not exclusively, but that's how we got started, right? So to your point then, what else do tabletop role-playing games offer? Social support. We know from God decades, 40 years of research, that one of the best ways to promote positive mental health is through social support. Healthy, present, non-judgmental social support. So your fellow players, your
You're a
GM,
feller.
your fellow player, right? I mean, all of this stuff. It's there are so many aspects of playing an RPG that really do mimic real life and the needs of real life. When it comes to mental health, especially in times like this.
So, um, here's a question. I don't know if I have an answer for it. I'm more, interestingly enough, this, I'm more of an introvert. I'm more comfortable not being in crowds,
Yep.
sitting at my desk or chair with books to read or games to look at.
Yep.
Um, I get a little anxious like when I have to go to large social environments. I'm not like family parties and things like that, but if we're going to a sporting event or a concert event or something,
Right.
there has been an in I have seen, and maybe it's just visuals on my part. There are more solo RPG type games out there
A
this
very good
year,
point. Yes.
and what could be, obviously that eliminates the social aspect in terms of sitting at a table and
In
playing.
a way, yep.
But you know, I don't want to turn this into an interviewing and put you on the spot, but from just your perspective, I'll give you my perspective after. But what do you see as a benefit doing something like that um, during the holiday season, or is it more difficult?
It's
Yeah.
no, I think it's a beautiful point. I mean, uh I think it's evidence that it really can be healthy to play with yourself. Had to go there.
Oh,
You set me
oh,
up for
there
it.
you go.
Um
Explicit. You got the
there we
explicit
go.
tag.
Yep. Obviously I'm talking about with dice, pervert.
Sure you
But
are.
um I think it's a really good point. Before we started recording, we were talking, you were bringing up how many solo games have come out, and that really seems to be the case. I could swear I've seen one or two articles on this recently.
Yeah.
Just how many solo games across sci-fi and fantasy genres. And this is a new thing. I think back to one of our earlier interviews with the Balls and how far ahead, what Beth and Jonathan, and how far ahead they were with this. I mean, they
Oh,
really were
with
ahead. We
D&D
really,
duetting.
yes, we really have to have them back. This notion
Yeah.
that you don't need a table full. But I think, my friend, to your point, this is really crucial because one of the reasons that the holiday season, whatever that means, one of the reasons that this period of time in the Northern Hemisphere, or flip that around in the Southern Hemisphere, is so difficult is because of not just the environmental issues and the pressures of this time of year, but many people feel isolated. Whether
Yeah.
they are or are not in fact isolated, to your point, they don't want to be around others, or maybe they don't have the opportunity to be around others. Can one still benefit from a tabletop RPG? Yeah, I think they really can, for as silly as this sounds, all of the same reasons. I think about the solo RPGs we've seen, we've read, and of course everyone who listens to Dice and Mine knows we are just major fans and adherents to the Star Trek Adventures Captain's Log. Shout out to Michael Dismuke and Jim Johnson and team. But I bring it up because I'm most familiar with that one. And that one, like some of the others, is written almost as if it's in discussion with you as the solo player. And it walks you through how to have these solo adventures. And you know what? There are characters, right? Those solo adventures are as full of NPCs, if not more so, than a standard party based RPG. And so, Brad, I think you're 100% right. I think everything we're talking about with a standard RPG situation applies still to solo, and that's an opportunity for people who are feeling isolated to still have fun, find
You
meaning,
can
find
get an
support.
escape, right? I mean,
Huge,
there's an escape quality. I know
but in
that
a good way,
in a good way.
not in
Yeah.
a repressing way, in a good
No,
way.
no. I mean, if you think about it, for some people, like you know this, every holiday season, I watch the extended version of the Lord of the Rings series, the
And that's
three.
so cool.
You
Yeah,
know, every holiday, it's as we're recording. I haven't started. Um, I haven't started yet, but I probably will start
coming.
this week
Okay,
so that I'll be finished by Christmas.
have to let me know.
Um, but there is a really positive vibe when I watch them, even if we're at the end of the third movie. It's just, to me, the story is
My
uplifting.
friends, you bow to no one.
I get
Oh my
emotional every
God,
time I see that,
every time.
every time. But even with, like, every other year I binge DS9 too. I'll start
Yeah,
that in January.
yeah,
Um, but having DS9 on, and either having the Star Trek Core rulebook
yeah.
or the captain's log, I can see that as a positive method of
Yes,
escape and creativity, because whether it's captain's log or the Iron Sworn series, Five
yes.
Parsecs from Home, Forbidden Lands, if you're ironically Lord of the Rings, they have the Strider add-on that allows you to do solo
Mm-hmm.
that way. There's even,
I
you
want to,
know
if you don't, I want to interrupt for just a sec here,
yeah, yeah,
because I'm 100% with you, but I want to reframe a word.
yeah,
I want to
please.
encourage all of us to not focus so much on escape, but
Thank you.
on
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah, there's a negative connotation with that.
And
And
yeah, sometimes escape is really healthy and important, but long term it doesn't work. And yeah, maybe in the first few bits of your solo game it's escapism, right? I mean, welcome to television.
mhm,
But the benefits aren't the escape. The benefits are the immersion in a
yes.
healthy reality that you can then keep with you as you go on about your day or week later on.
Well, and it again, this is kind of a stream of consciousness episode. I just, by you reframing that, it reminds me of something I've been meaning to ask for a while, and it comes and goes. It's not a big deal. How does creativity, and I think we can all answer this in some form, but like longer term, the use of one's skills, attributes, whatever, to be creative, like you working on piano, me playing guitar or horn, or we writing, doing captain's log or playing or whatever, using those creative juices long term, does that have a long term benefit? Have there been studies about it? Long term benefit to one's mental health? And that may be just too
Oh
nebulous,
man, it's not too nebulous. That's a great question.
you know. More of a rhetorical. We'll have to come back around to this because again, I just dropped that on you right now. But so again, I sit down and I pick up Iron Sworn and
Yeah,
I'm reading through it and I'm kind of excited and I start kind of rolling the dice.
yeah,
To me, it's not like an endorphin or adrenaline rush. It's just a joy.
right.
I It's a joy. It's not. I'm gonna stop using that. You made a really good point. I'm not gonna use the word escape. It's a period of joy doing something like that. Much like you've talked in the past, and I suspect you'll talk in the future. When you travel, you carry dice.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
for me, having one of those games by my chair,
Right.
um, I could flip open, and like we've talked, I use RPGs as lit. I read the books.
Yep.
Um, some of these solo games have really intrigued me just because I can open a book and get some joy from even playing part of a game, a larger campaign, or whatever the case may
And
be.
there's no right or wrong. There's
Mhm.
no obligation. It's what fits, right? And like for you and for me, that might be a little different day by day.
Oh, it'll be, yeah, I would
Yeah.
suspect, just because we are different in many ways as much as we are the same, it would be a different type of longer term result for you than it would be for me.
Well, but
Um,
like what either of us though maybe wants to do with it day by day can
yeah.
even change, right? Some days you sit down and you open one of the books and you read for a while. Other days, just having it on the nightstand to see is a source of comfort. A sort and I mean, you're smiling, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we're being really serious, everybody.
Yes,
This
absolutely.
this is something that, my wife looks at this stuff like when I do this, like, why are you doing that? And it's like
Mhm.
because it can bring joy, because it provides an avenue, it provides an outlet. It's a reminder of how wonderful things can be, even when we can't see it or can't believe they can be. These are visceral reminders that, oh yeah, that next step, that opportunity, that joy, just that stepping out for an hour of the fog,
Mhm.
it never has to be more than a couple pages away.
Yeah. And I mean, for both of us, we love the air quote analog book, the
Yeah, we do.
printed book.
PDFs are great too, though.
PDFs are great. Don't get me wrong. I my Kindle is loaded up, but when it comes to RPGs, there's just something about reading through a core rule book when they have a sample, encounter or whatever the case is. The other thing, um, you know, I have found personally, I don't know how it would be with others. You're not big into this, is going out on social media, Reddit, Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and reading about others' experiences
Hmm.
playing these
Yeah.
games. Having someone put out their own, maybe they're doing their own solo captain's log adventure and they're publishing it out on
Yeah.
Reddit or whatever the
Yeah. It's
case
so
is.
cool.
I read those. I enjoy them, but I know that I have a threshold
Yeah.
that if I do too much of that, then um, you know, I've oversaturated and the negatives outweigh the positives.
And I
Um,
think that's really important to keep
mhm.
in mind, right? That while we're doing this, we don't want to impose false or artificial criteria or expectations on ourselves. We want to do this so that it's helpful, it's healthy, right? These are always just opportunities, they're not obligations. And you and I have been as guilty of that, as anyone of, oh, we should be doing X, Y, and Z. Like, I'm sure that no one has noticed that we haven't released a Trek Talk in how long?
Well, whose
Even though
fault is that?
we,
That's my
well,
fault.
even though we've got like 3 or 4 in the can, right? We just haven't released them and we haven't recorded or written anymore. And I was thinking about this the other day and it's kind of like, well, so be it. We'll probably come back to them. And
Oh,
we will when we do. And that's
yeah,
it.
we will. And um, I think it's important. Again, I'm not a clinician. I'm just giving, this is more personal perspective than anything else. Um, if you're a gamer, find ways to to find ways to find your joy in this realm, even if you can't necessarily get in front of folks in front of a table.
Mhm.
We all went through this in 2020. Um, People might be busy with holiday parties and things like that. There are so many things out there from a gaming perspective that if you need to lift your spirits and you think that whether it's a solo game or doing some reading, you know, some of the Facebook groups out there for some of these games are just fascinating. Or out here on the media site formerly known as Twitter. Um, I don't like calling it the other name.
No one likes
Um,
calling it X.
yeah. Um, out on, I'm going to just call Twitter, out on Twitter, reach out. We've talked about this a million times, how it's a very inclusive
Mhm.
community. And it should be a comfort to folks.
And importantly, so many of these things are free. There are so many
Oh,
first-rate free PDFs for all of our favorite games.
yep.
YouTube, I'm not a big YouTuber, but YouTube is just replete, oh my
Oh,
God, with actual play, with unboxing, with reviews of games. Sometimes it's just fun, if you ask me, to watch reviews of games or game
yeah.
books because they do a flip through, they talk about it, like all the stuff we all care about. And so you don't have to have cash in your pocket to get a lot of this benefit. It's nice when you can hold something, but man, the stuff out there is just incredible.
Oh, it's first rate stuff. I mean, there's really cool stuff out there. And even if it's not free, it's pennies on the dollar or pay what you can if you go out to
Yeah,
drive through
yeah.
RPG. You can even ask the question out on Twitter, and people are going to give you, if you hashtag it correctly, you will be inundated and potentially overwhelmed with things that could um,
Oh,
occupy your
yeah.
time if you're looking for that.
Yeah.
I think it's just, um, to your benefit, if this is a passion, and you are one who sometimes will struggle, whether it's this time of year or whether it's the summer or winter, whatever it is, um, use that fuel and
Yeah.
find ways. Um, you know, I'm not a clinician. Jason doesn't practice online. If you need a direction to go to find that stuff,
Hmm.
let us know. We've
Yep.
made enough contacts out there amongst some of just creative, brilliant people.
Yep.
We can give you guidance as to what
That's
what
right.
we know. We're not experts.
Yep.
And again, this is not therapy. This is just offering some direction.
That's right.
And just a reminder that, um, yeah, it's a tough time of year. Um, suicide hotline is 988.
Very good.
Um, do not, do not, trust me, you are not alone. You are not the only one that feels this way. Um, there is always a deeper bottom than where you're at. It's very hard to hit
Hmm.
absolute, in my opinion, hit absolute rock
Yeah.
bottom. Um, I've never met someone who has fallen in that hole and wanted to get out and not gotten out.
Yeah, I have
Mhm.
lots of people. And so I would just remind everybody, kind of akin to what you're saying, Brad, there really is always help available.
Yeah.
And no matter what we've been taught, there is never any shame in
Mhm.
availing yourself of that help.
No, I think you can, not to, I don't want to sidetrack too far in this, and it's not a session about me, but, um, because I, the way I grew up with being in a divorced family and everything like that, and the baggage I carried from that, I had a lot of years of therapy. And I think one of the biggest things that it helped me do is to become more introspective,
Hmm.
more aware of my own nuances mentally.
Hmm.
And honestly, um, I have friends that I can talk to. I don't talk to Jason with Jason as a clinician or anyone else in our group. Um, no one has to be a clinician if you just
Mm-mm.
need immediate help and you want to talk to someone.
And you don't have to
Yeah.
know anything to reach out to your friends and loved ones and lend a hand either.
Mm-mm.
Just lending an ear can do wonders. Just helping someone in the moment to feel heard, to feel validated. You don't have to say much, you just have to listen.
Well, you know what? This will be my last comment on it. If you're at a point where you're struggling and you know that there are others amongst your social circles or whatever that are also struggling, um, call them too. You know, You might find someone who's in effect, a kindred spirit who's going through something similar, and there's some healing that can occur together. Again, it's just anecdotal, personal um, experience. But whatever you do, find a game, watch the Lord of the Rings binge the original, binge the whole 9 Star Wars movies, whatever. Um, Ignore every other Star Trek series, but just binge DS9. Um, Jason's laughing at that, but just find something. And I know it's very cliche to say this, but if you're listening to this show, you're probably interested in games. You find joy in it. Find some joy in it at this time of year. Um, there's so much out there now, more than there was even 5 years ago. You know what? I think we should change the GM corner to like 10 forward or something like that. And
That's
we
not a bad
should
idea.
we should beam over to 10 forward and talk about what's on our table. So we don't, I don't know, I'm just going to use that as the analogy as we're during holiday week. So
That's
um
awesome.
as you beam over to, not that anyone beams directly into 10 forward unless the Enterprise has been hijacked, but um what's been on your desk or otherwise the past week, for example?
Well, it's funny you should make a Star Wars connection. Sorry, Star Trek connection. Uh-oh, I'm tired.
Wow.
Wow. I just
Wow.
I just
Calendar
channeled
time.
I just channeled my inner wives, right?
Yeah.
Both of ours and our
Wow.
parents.
Are
Um,
you watching that Trek Wars again?
my favorite is still, right, greatest Star Trek fan, and it's either the Millennium Falcon or the Firefly, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, I love the part where Mr. Spock takes out the Wookiees. Um, so, but yeah, obviously, okay. So getting back on a track here. But it's not what's on my desk so much as what I'm hoping or wondering might be on my desk in the future. You and I were talking about this off air. Uh, End of the year is approaching, and we know a lot of the game publishers and a lot of publishers in general like to announce upcoming
I
products.
know where you're going.
You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
And it is December, and I would just point out to our dear friends, truly good, fine people at Modifius, uh, Jim Johnson and the ilk, that at least as we are recording this, which is just a bit before it's going to drop, not too far ahead, um, we are still wondering, inquiring minds want to know, if there is going to be an announcement or announcements for upcoming Star Trek Adventures products. We know there will be in the future because you guys are always working on something.
And we play our own little private conjecture game where
Yes.
Jason and I are not gamblers or betting people, but it's more for
Yep.
just for humor's sake. We're like, okay, it could go this route, it could be this, it could be that, and then we'll see if we're right, because we, as we have with all of our guests and friends who work for companies, we don't ask for spoilers, we don't expect them, we don't want them,
We don't get them.
we don't get them. So we have no inside information from companies.
But we are placing our internal private bets, if you will,
Yes, yeah.
on what's coming next from Modifius for Star Trek Adventures. We're not going to share them here because we're probably wrong. But we're trying to figure it out, and let me rephrase that. We know what we want to see so we can play with it.
I'm not going to go there. I'm just thinking about how we would bet. If we should bet what we call Kaufman bucks, and one Kaufman buck is one shred of your integrity. So,
Well, neither of us are able to play this game very long. Actually, what we should do is it should be the gentleman's bet that if either of us ever get it right,
which would be the first,
which would be a first, the other has to buy a copy for them.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. if we won't start at this time because we were kind of both on similar pages with some of this.
Uh-huh. But
And
often
then
we're
we have
not.
our outlier ideas. Um, but interestingly, so I'm gonna hijack and segue automatically.
Yeah.
You messaged me as this drops just a few weeks back, because you found something on Amazon on sale and
Go
you
on.
ordered it.
Yes.
And I then saw that it was this it was like a speed deal, whatever Amazon has.
Yeah.
Um, I ordered it as well. We
Yeah.
both have our copies
It's
of
gorgeous.
the author illustrated Lord of the Rings, not the split books that you can buy where Fellowship of the Ring is 1, Two Towers. It is the full volume Tolkien
Yep, much
illustrated.
much like it was meant to be, which is
Mhm.
how I read it. Essentially, the first time with the Barnes and Noble paperback, except that
Mhm.
this one is truly not even split into the books at all. It really is just the chapters.
It is, yeah, and
It is
you and I talked
gorgeous.
about this before. It is a gorgeous tome. Um,
Red-edged paper with I think it's Elvish
yeah,
over it. Oh man.
came with a map,
Two maps.
2 maps.
Yeah.
It has a bookmark ribbon in it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
you and I have talked. We're like, do we read it? I don't want to like sully it, but on the flip side,
Yeah.
it's one of
Yeah.
those books that just cries out to be read.
Like all books, but especially, and I don't,
But
I,
especially this one.
I don't ever buy books for the sake of not reading them. Like
Mhm.
you once in a while will buy a second copy to keep it pristine, and
Yeah.
I won't do that. Now, I'll be honest with this special release of The Lord of the Rings, for example, I'm not going to take this traveling. Like
No,
I
this one's
don't.
gonna
This
stay.
one's too nice. I
Yeah.
don't. It's just so gorgeously produced. I hesitate to put it in a backpack and take it out of state or out of country because you can't help but
The
ding it up.
dust cover is gorgeous with it as well.
Oh,
That's
and you notice that I didn't even realize that the center of the dust cover with the Eye of
yes.
Sauron isn't the
Yes.
dust cover.
No, it
Oh
isn't.
man. Yeah,
Yeah,
people.
it is a beautiful tome. Maybe you can put a link to it in the share note, the
Yeah, that's a good
the
idea.
show notes,
Mm-hmm.
just for the heck of it. But piggybacking off of that, we talked before that came out, so maybe it was a little bit of kismet. We talked about the idea of at some point playing the One Ring. Um, and as mentioned before and again, we already have kind of a list of stuff that we are going to play.
Yep, yep.
Um, but it's one of those things that going into 2024 will continue to be a discussion topic for us. Um,
Yeah.
as to whether or not I have the core rule book. It's just a matter of, um, you know, there's only a finite amount of capital, so Jason is stringent in using it. I'm have to be more stringent now than I was, where I was much more liberal before. Um, but the idea of playing that, so I
Yeah.
actually took the One Ring core rule book and brought it upstairs when that copy of Lord of the Rings came in. And I'm going to
Yeah.
keep them. I'm going to keep them on my table until I finish the binge of the original trilogy movies,
Yeah,
not The Hobbit, but
the One Ring, it really as we've talked, it remains on my watch list. As I said to you off air, at the point that I can find it on sale,
yeah,
just because it's probably we might play it, but we'll definitely read it and talk about it, and that's the attraction to me. To be honest, everything that I've
yeah.
heard about it, what you've told me about it, and what I've seen about it, um, at the point that I can justify, because it's a bit steep. I mean, core rule
Oh, it's
books are.
it's
Come on,
it's a
you
it's a
know.
more expensive core rule book than
Yep,
others that are out there.
yeah. But if
Absolutely.
I can find a little more reasonably, that would be pretty neat. That
Mhm.
that would be pretty neat because I mean, we're no experts in Tolkien, right? In Lord of the Rings.
No,
Not like our
no,
friend Russ.
no. Yeah.
But we know our way around it, and of course we grew up with it,
Hmm.
right? My dad read us. I still have it. I read it to my girls when they were little. My dad read us the illustrated copy from the 70s when my brother and I were really little. And
Oh,
all the pages are falling off to show you sometime, and I have it, and my girls remember me reading it to them. And of course it's, shall we say, so much shorter. And I'm sorry, it's The Hobbit. It's not, right, it's the kids version of The Hobbit, not
that's
the Lord
what
of the Rings.
that's what
But
I mean.
same, right?
Yeah, the Hobbit came out in animated form in the 70s. I remember in the early
And
80s.
this has all of the illustrations from that cartoon
Oh,
in
that's
it.
cool.
So this was, right, this was the, I mean, The Hobbit as we grew up as children.
It was the Rankin Bass, uh, animation. You see a lot of that with some of the holiday cartoons, not claymation, but the holiday cartoons from the 70s and 80s
Yeah.
that are still out there. It's that same type of animation, which is nostalgic, but and still worth it. Um,
Yeah, I would have to agree.
but the Hobbit, I remember watching that as they're in elementary school because I was in a reading class where I was younger than the other students. I was younger by 3 years. I was a second grader taking fifth grade reading, and I remember them watching this, and it was probably on the borderline over my head a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I remember being fascinated by it, and then years later, finding it on VHS and watching it because I wanted to go back and catch everything. This is before I'd even read the books and before the movies.
Yeah.
So, but
So
I
as
that's the only thing. I mean that book is probably going to be the um that's going to be the high point for Christmas for me in terms of
nice.
purchases.
It's
So
it's
it's gorgeous.
it's one of it's easily one of the most beautiful printings of any book I've ever seen.
Yeah,
Easily.
absolutely.
So to tie this all together, everybody, as we move on from Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, and we check back in with the importance of mental health and taking care of oneself during these, in the Northern Hemisphere, darker months, but often difficult couple months, few months for people around the world to really uh, mash up everything. It's okay to go there, but then we need to get back again. So be well, stay well. We will see you next week.